But his ideas are always better than mine. That's the thing with actors, right?
Actors are smart, right?
Yeah.
They are.
They are.
That works out well for you, Maggie. Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning into the Hollywood Reporter's Writer Roundtable. I'm Scott Feinberg, and I am honored to be joined today by the writers of 5 of 2021's most special screenplays, and we'll get into the specific origin stories of each of these movies. But again, just generally, I guess I'd love it if we could talk a little bit about how you came to realizing, hey, I'm a writer. And Zach, maybe you could start us off.
I mean, I always knew I wanted to write, and I moved to New York and was just trying to find a foothold into the industry, and I started PAing and I worked on sets, and I ended up working in the art department, and I was a prop and I did a set dresser, and but I probably wasn't a very good employee because I would usually just go in the truck and I'd have the sides and I was just writing my own stuff on the back of the sides all day, and it took a long time to sort of figure out both how to do it but also how to navigate. There's not a natural place where you can be on set and then just go up to the show creator and say here, I have a script, can you read it? So just kind of a lot of bad starts and keep hammering it out.
Sean, you had acted, you have worked in television. When did you realize I'm a writer, and maybe specifically a writer of films?
I think I was always a writer. That was always an outlet for me creatively. I think it was, that was something that was my private thing that kept me going and was an outlet. I grew up in a family of artists, and it was find whatever your art is, whatever that may be. And I was an actor and went to Carnegie Mellon for acting, and then I was telling David, Sopranos was my first acting job out of college, and then I got cut out of the show, so maybe that's the reason I'm not an actor anymore.
You did you stood around the path.
You're the reason I'm a writer-director is because I got cut out of the Sopranos. But I lived in New York and I was acting, but I was always writing was my thing. And then I think when I moved out to LA, I was a part of lots of writing groups where it would be actors and writers would come and writers would bring pages and actors would cold read, and it was kind of a workshop space for everybody. And it felt like a safe space to start bringing my writing in and to be on the other side of it. And then I really loved that, and ended up with a piece that I brought in there. I was actually working as a nanny at all of the 4-star hotels in LA and having these really weird, surreal experiences. And I wrote a scene about this night that I had as a nanny or babysitter for some really screwed up family. And I wrote this scene and brought it into that night and heard it read, and I was this is a film. I want to make this as a short film, and then applied to AFI, to the Directing Workshop for Women, with that film. And then that short film that I made, that was my first film, ended up going to Cannes and was in competition at Cannes and then won an award. So it sort of felt I'm the story I never want to tell young filmmakers of you can make a short that'll change your life and start your career, but that kind of is what happened to me. And then, it took me 9 years to get my first feature made from that short. And in that time, I wrote on Orange is the New Black for 4 seasons. I, developed a TV career. So it was kind of moving between TV and film, and film was always kind of I was trying to get these film projects going, but honing my skills in a TV writer's room, and producing my episodes and watching every director on set. And so I felt it was a great training ground for me.
Jeymes, AKA The Bullets, tell us about your background.
For me, as a writer, I always kind of saw, people know me as a musician.
Yeah.
As The Bullets, named after the Steve McQueen movie, Bullet.
Nice.
But for me, I've always seen script and song as the same thing. I was always doing them both. There was always instruments in the house. I was always studying film, and I was always writing, right? So, roughly 3 acts in a script, 3 verses in a song. A chef serves 3 courses. It's pretty much all the same thing. You start in one place and you end up in a place where the rules are the same, where you learn something. And I was always doing all of them, and I was always shooting short films and putting the music behind it, and but writing the shorts. And the only outlet I had was the hood that I grew up in. So I would just gather up all in sundry, as it were, like all the criminals, all the nerds, and I'll be literally the filmmaker on the corner, like just making all of these things. And then, you know, like musically, I think because I love film so much, I would write songs from a really strange place. Like I'll do a song with Jay-Z and Charlotte Gainsbourg called Dinner at Tiffany's. The song's like a 7-minute opus. Everything I do musically always had a cinematic tone to it. I've always said, like, I see music and I hear film. Much like you, I wrote and directed a short film 10 years ago. I wrote the film 10 years ago. I shot it in 2012 called They Die by Dawn. It was a Western with a lot of the same characters that's in the film. It's like a 50-minute Western, starred Michael K. Williams, Giancarlo Esposito, Roger Guinevere Smith, Nate Parker, Harry Lennox, like all of these great, Rosario Dawson, Erykah Badu, and it was a Western. And I went around, you know, like festivals with it, and I knew that people want to see people of color in a Western, even if they don't know they wanted to see people of color in a Western. You know, Westerns have been given to us, it's a very narrow scope. If you're a woman in a Western, you're always subservient to this a weakened male plot. If you're a person of color in a Western, you're always, you know, you're really treated less than human, subservient in some way. And I love Westerns so much. I just wanted to kind of like broaden the scope. And so I wrote the initial draft of what was The Harder They Fall years, you know, maybe close to 10 years ago, soon after I directed that film. And I just kind of worked my way up doing music and doing this and really until I managed to get the film.
And they really merged in this. Maggie, Oscar-nominated actress who's been doing that for a while, and now moving over to the other side. What was that something you've always wanted to do? When did that kind of emerge as a desire of yours?
Well, now that I've made my film, I can see that it was always something that I wanted to do. As an actress, and I love acting, and I miss acting, actually. It's been a really long time. But I was always backing up against something. Like, I was never really satisfied. And I think there are different kinds of actors. My favorite kind of actor to watch, and also the kind that I am, is I'm a storyteller. I have a point of view. There's a reason that this part came to me at this moment. There's something I want to articulate. And I think rarely are people interested in actresses with ideas. I mean, they like it a little bit, you know, but I don't think they like it a lot. And I remember reading this thing, I don't even know if this is true, someone will tell me, but I think I read that Meryl Streep said, years ago, I read this, that she said, if you have an idea artistically and it's something you need as an actress, offer it up with a spoonful of sugar. And it's great advice, and I took that advice for many years, but it's a lot of extra work. And I even found, like on The Deuce, for example, where I played a director, she was originally supposed to be, she's a prostitute who, you know, gets involved in porn and was originally supposed to be a producer, more of like a money-minded, sort of excellently money-minded. And I said to David Simon, like, she's gotta be an artist, she's gotta be a director, because someone who's willing to die for money, you know, put their life on the line, is a very different person than someone that's willing to put their life on the line for their work, you know, where it's like survival, life or death for your art, you know. So she became a director, and two things happened simultaneously there. One was I was not just like pretending to be a director, but really deeply imagining, how would I shoot this scene? Okay, it's porn, well, that's all she has access to. That's all I have access to right now. But how would I shoot it? And how would I treat my actors? And how would I deal with this editing situation? And because I was a producer, I was seeing early cuts of things, and I had, hundreds of ideas about them. I would write these 4-paragraph long essays about why this scene couldn't be cut or must be cut. You can't cut the orgasm because that's what makes it feminist, and I thought that was the whole point. But I had to make it funny and just exactly right, excellently written. And again, it's a lot of work. It's funny, even as I was thinking about what to wear today, which we were talking about, such an interesting thing as a woman, I had this blouse, which was very 1940s, and I thought, yeah, there were some great writers in the 40s who were women who were killing it, but directors, very, very few. There were, look, Jane Campion, here she is with a film out this year too that's brilliant, and she was an outlier and she did it. But for me, when I was younger, I think I thought, if I'm a storyteller and I love film, I'm gonna do it as an actress, but it didn't satisfy me.
Yeah. So speaking of frustration as an artist, David, I know that for decades you were doing great and acclaimed work in television, from the Rockford Files or the Sopranos and many things in between, and yet throughout all that time, that was sort of the last place you wanted to be, from what I understand, right?
Yes, but I was fortunate in that I worked with and for really talented people. And I liked the people I worked with. It was always, once I got on the Rockford Files, it was fun. But the simple fact of the matter is that I went to film school when film school was not a big deal. It was becoming one.
Yeah.
At first I wanted to be a cinematographer, but I have left red-green color problems, so I thought, well, you can't do that job. And then I wanted to be a director when I was still in film school. And a friend of mine and I wrote a screenplay that our writing teacher sent to a TV producer. And he liked it, and after being in LA for a year and a half waiting, I got a job. And my wife was working to support us, and I was so happy that now money was going to be coming in. I remember us dancing around the living room. And so I got involved in TV, and I sold out, I guess. I kept writing screenplays, but all about women, actually. And I just couldn't sell them. And I just kept working myself up in TV. And then the opportunity to do The Sopranos came along, and that was just another TV job, except it was going to be on HBO, so that was going to be different. And that made all the difference in the world. And
there was a part of you, I remember, sorry to interrupt, but I just think we have to note, you almost didn't want them to pick up the pilot, right?
Yeah.
And that was because it could have then potentially become a film.
Well, when I saw what we had done, I showed it to friends of mine, and they were all really into it. And I thought, well, this is really good. Then I thought, well, maybe if they don't pick it up, I hope, I can get them to spring for another $500,000, shoot another 30 minutes, and take it to Cannes. This was my big deal.
And that would have been it?
That would have been it, but that's not what happened.
Now I guess I want to zero in more specifically on these projects that you've made this year that we're talking about. Maggie, this novel by Elena Ferrante, we should note, this is a pseudonym. You have not, as far as I know to this day, met her or directly spoken with her. It's all over emails. She'd never had one of her novels made into an English language project. Why was The Lost Daughter something you wanted to get involved with? And then how does that even work when you're trying to get the rights from somebody we don't even know who she is or he is?
No, I'm sure she's a woman. I'm sure the men want to claim her, but I'm sorry, she's ours for sure. I think that there's something inherently dramatic about telling the truth, and in particular about telling the truth about something that you're not supposed to talk about, that's taboo. And, even if you think about I'm gonna tell you a secret, it's like everyone's ears prick up, and if you're then honest about what you say, I think it's really solid ground dramatically. And so I had read the Neapolitan novels, which were the kind of bestseller books of hers, and I was stunned by how truthful they were. I was like, it's kind of like you said, people want to see people of color in a Western, even if they don't know they want it. And I think that that was true. She was saying things that I felt and I thought, even though I didn't even know that I was hungry to hear that and like kind of dying to hear that. Things about being a woman in the world, yes, being a mother, but also being a lover, being a thinker, being an artist as a woman. But I think there have been fascinating movies that all of us would probably agree that we love and are excellently made and moving about women. But so often they leave out huge aspects of my experience, and to the point where I sort of started to wonder, like, I'm not seeing any representations of myself that actually include these strange edges. The edges of perversity and despair and terror and darkness, but also the edges of the degree of hunger and desire and ecstasy and all of it. Ferrante includes that. And I found it shocking and stunning and both terrifying to read some of these truthful things she was writing down, and also really comforting. Because you're like, oh, someone else thinks this too. And then I thought, okay, well, what if instead of alone in my room with a book, what if we could do it in a community space? Then it's really not a secret. Then it's really exposing something. And a movie theater is that. And maybe you could be actually hearing these truthful things said out loud, actually seeing them articulated, maybe sitting next to like your mother or your husband or your daughter. And then like the cat is out of the bag, you know? And I thought that might be a very radical thing.
I have to tell Maggie, so your movie, the secret feeling of your movie has become like code in my house between my husband and I now, where we were in the car and like our kids were like screaming in the back seat, and he was like, I'm having a lost daughter moment. And I was like, which basically means like I want to run from this car and like run away for 3 years and never come back. So your movie has now given us our code word for like, I need to leave right now and get out of this house so I don't like blow up at my children. Yeah.
And you know, interestingly enough, like so many people have that moment.
Yes.
But you recognize it when you're watching your movie, like that, as you call it, the lost daughter moment. I've had so many lost daughter
I might
moments.
run away to a cabin and never return and have an affair with somebody, and
You know, all of a sudden, the inside, you could be all macho, and the inside of you is like.
Well, let's go to David, because people have been trying to get you to revisit The Sopranos since 2007 when it first wrapped the series run. You resisted, it felt like, for a long time. What basically convinced you to go back, and thank you for doing so.
Well, I had thought from the first, I was talking with Tom Fontana, and he said, this is way early, and he said, you should do something that takes place in Newark in the 30s with Tony's parents. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then I just sort of forgot about it, and I really didn't want to do a Sopranos movie of any kind. And Toby Emmerich, New Line, he kept on me and on me. He really never gave up, which is, I mean, it sort of makes you want to do it in an emotional way, that somebody would pursue you that much. But I still wasn't really into it. And then we had a couple of medical crises at my house, and I kind of really needed to work. And my co-writer, Lawrence Connor, said, well, we got to get to work.
Well, and we should say that in between the end of The Sopranos and this prequel, you had written and directed another film, Not Fade Away, which was a more autobiographical film.
But Not Fade Away, I made a lot of mistakes. It was a studio film, and I listened to the studio. And I wish I could do it over again.
Just not take notes or whatever it is?
Yeah, I don't know that I took notes. They just got me panicked about length and all that, you know. And I was not used to listening to anybody from being on The Sopranos. And I thought, wait, this is your first film. Maybe you should listen to people. And anyway.
Jeymes, we talked about They Die by Dawn, which, again, you know, sort of the world of an all-black Western. And the idea now of turning it into a feature, first feature, and doing it, I guess, in collaboration with Boaz Yakin. How did it start to come together that you would revisit that subject matter?
Well, you know, I didn't really revisit it. I made the short with the purpose of doing the feature.
Okay,
So,
it was
yeah,
always,
yeah. That was literally, I was just working. You know, I tell people in LA that I know really well, like my close friends out here. They're like, "How long did it take you to put this together?" I'm like, okay, well, how long do you know me?
No, yeah.
I tell people all the time,
Tiny
and how many times have you seen me? Okay, and we're really close, right? Have you ever seen me in London? No. That's how long I've been working on The Harder They Fall. Like, this was like mad trips to the point where everyone knew me. I didn't have a visa, and everyone knew me at LAX immigration. One time I was red carded, like red flagged. Like when you come in, the red flag comes up. They're like, "Oh, Jeymes, you have to go to the back. You're red flagged on the system." And then I had them all. I was telling them the story of The Harder They Fall, and one of them was like, the boss at LAX immigration when I didn't have a visa. He went, "I can't wait to see this movie." Well, I won't be able to make it if you don't let me.
Yeah,
in,
right.
Let me do me. And then I got a visa. So.
Yes, nice.
So I was always working on it. It was something I was super passionate about, just because of the images. And I feel guilty at how much I love westerns. Like one of the dopest scenes in a western ever is when Lee Van Cleef and Clint Eastwood face off over the hats in For a Few Dollars More. They face off and they're shooting the hat in the air. And now that seems really hard for me to watch because of the way they treat the Chinese man at the beginning. Like, take it in, take it to the station, take it in, take it to the station, take it in. Oh, never in the history of mankind has a Chinese person ever gone, oh. But on film and in westerns, they do, and all of these things would just pretty much play on me. So growing up, I'll start reading about all of these real characters: Rufus Buck, Nat Love, Stagecoach Mary, Gertrude Smith, Cherokee Bill, Bill Pickett, Jim Beckwith, Wiley Esco, Bass Reeves, and like, wow. So I kind of assembled them all in one place and one time, like the Avengers. And then Boaz, and I wrote like a good few drafts of The Harder They Fall. And I was like, okay, well, look, before I take this all away, firstly, I need to assemble a super group to get it done. Jay-Z. Like, you know, you start thinking of all these things pretty much when I'm in London. And Jay-Z and I worked together for years, so that was natural. And then Boaz came on board and you know, like helped me with like structure and stuff, and like, you know, but really when Boaz came on board, I was being told that I would never get the budget that I want for this movie. You know, when you write, there is no budget, so you're writing, you just don't care. Like my pen, I'm like Han Solo in Star Wars. We'll pay you more than you can imagine. Well, I can imagine quite a lot. So when I'm writing, I'm imagining all the way, like bank robberies, train robberies, jailbreaks, and I'm writing. This is the movie I want to make. And so Boaz was like more like the consolidation, like, Jeymes, look, man, it's going to be too big. Incidentally, after all that, I got the budget I wanted to, and I got my bank robberies and train robberies and jailbreaks. Like I told you, I'm going to get.
I want to go to Sean now because in the case of this film, CODA, it is a adaptation with some major changes of this French film that we mentioned, and I wonder if you can talk about what drew you to it. What was the appeal, the primary appeal for you?
Yeah, I mean, we're both avoiding saying the name of the French film because we can't. La Famille Bélier, with my horrible. Yeah. There you go. I just need Jeymes is going to say it for us. Yeah, we'll keep like pointing at you whenever we need to say it. It was originally a Lionsgate movie, and Maggie was talking about female directors, and also I found that, after I fought for 9 years to make my first feature and made my first feature and went to Sundance and had this moment, all I got offered was teenage girl stories. Like it was like the only movies and projects coming my way were, high school girls. And I was like, I don't want to tell a story. I felt like I made a complex first film that was about motherhood and the complexity of these kind of secret things. And then I kind of was getting all these teenage girl stories. So originally when I heard the premise of this, I was like, oh my God, here's another one. Yeah. Like another teenage girl that apparently this is gonna be my directing career. But when I watched the film, there was such a specificity to who that girl was, and such an interesting, precarious place for a teenager to be in, which is just, it's already a time in your life when you're searching for your identity, where you're trying to individuate from your family. And the cultural specificity of the story and the character of this CODA at the center, which I had never heard that term before. I was not a part of the deaf community. I was like, oh, child of deaf adults. Oh, that's interesting. And then also I think I was immediately struck that CODA was a musical term too, and that it was, represented the end of a piece of music. And I was like, what a beautiful, it felt like a story about the end of childhood and the way that we have to pull apart, and how painful that pulling apart process can be when your family has cooked you and made you exactly who you are. And the idea of a hearing person who grows up, I watched the film once, the French film. I never used the screenplay. I was like, I just want to kind of watch it and absorb what moves me, absorb the scenes I remember, maybe like keep it as like a loose structure working at the back of my mind, but really be free to kind of follow where I want this story to go. And then I really felt like, well, who am I to tell this story? I'm not a part of deaf culture. I didn't grow up this way. But I've always been someone who, like, my favorite part of being a writer is conversations with human beings. When you get to hear someone's story and really listen and hear multiple people's stories. And so I love real people in my research. So I immediately started reaching out to CODAs and started talking to all these different CODAs, and then these themes came up that were so beautiful because in the specificity, I really started to connect. I was like, oh, like I have immigrant parents, and that's interesting. I sort of shared that feeling of being culturally different from my parents and feeling like they didn't fully get me, and just kind of all these points of connections along the way. And the more that I started learning about deaf culture and being immersed in deaf culture, I was like, wow, deaf culture is really blunt and really like hilariously so sometimes. And there's a kind of connectivity and way that people deal with each other that felt like my family. Like I was like, I grew up in this like kind of out of line family that like told you exactly what they thought of you all the time. And I felt like I was like, oh, this family is feeling like it's my family. And so I don't know, I just saw all these ways to really connect, to find myself in the story. And then I couldn't find any stories when I went to kind of research like what films are out there that represent deaf characters or a deaf family. And I couldn't find anything. It was like going back 35 years to Children of a Lesser God and going, really? Like there's no other movies that show a family?
It's crazy, right?
It's really crazy. And so then I became very determined and also specific in the way that I wanted to make the movie. I was like, not only do I want to use deaf actors, I want to have the ASL be pure ASL. I don't want the hearing character talking through those scenes. I want a lot of silence in the film. I want to be able to explore kind of what this really is and what it feels like to be sitting around a dinner table with that family. So I don't know, I found my way. And so yes, I made the teenage girl story, but I did it in a way that felt very true to me.
Can I say something? You know, one of the things that sticks out about your film that you did amazingly is, like, if you watch Children of a Lesser God, and that's a wicked film. Remember the scene with the music and she starts moving to the sound. But watching it, I haven't seen it in years. I saw it as a child, but I was always outside of the language, right? I was outside of the language. In your film, I don't know if it's because of the way you've told the story or because I'm older, but immediately I am pulled inside the language. Like when you finish it, you feel like everyone was speaking with words. And even on my way here, like I was remembering a scene, I would swear it was words. It's like when you watch a foreign movie and you remember the scenes back, what they said to each other, you're speaking English in your head. If you remember, pick a scene from Old Boy. But what you did so amazingly in CODA is you pull your audience into the language. immediately. It's a really amazing thing. And I never actually got that with Children of Lesser God. Maybe I wasn't mature enough, but
Well, William Hurt is also speaking all of her
Yeah,
lines aloud.
yeah.
Like he's actually taking it from her
Yeah.
the whole movie. I mean, like for the time, I think it was an amazing thing. But to have the hearing character taking her voice and
yeah.
voicing her instead of letting her.
And maybe that's why I was
Yeah.
a child, but maybe that's why I was outside of the film. Whereas your movie, you pull us in immediately, and it's such an amazing feat.
And of
You
course,
didn't
the
make a
thread
teen movie.
connecting them, Marley
Yeah.
Matlin is in both. So, Zach, I just want to talk about the kind of crazy, fateful way that you came to tell the story that you did. I mean, it sounds like you go in there for a meeting with the producers, Tim and Trevor White, and it's about something completely unrelated. How do you wind up on this track?
Yeah, it was very fortuitous. I was in a meeting with a producer. You know, as I was leaving, I had just mentioned that I was going to the U.S. Open, and I'm a big tennis fan. And Tim White, one of the producers, was a huge junior tennis prodigy, and had kind of had a, you know, obviously not the trajectory that the Williams family had, but had grown up in that world. And he basically said, like, if you're going to the Open, if you like tennis, like, sit back down for like 5 minutes and let me tell you this project that I've been trying to get off the ground for a long time. And essentially, he had circled Richard and the Williams family as just like what could be an amazing story. And I don't know, it just hit me like one of those few times where you're like, if I don't get this opportunity, if I don't get a chance to write this, I'm gonna like really regret it. And I stopped everything I had and I went home for a weekend. I think they had another writer that they were about to close a deal on. And I was like, give me a weekend and let me at least see if I can figure out what the story is. And I went and I just read everything that I could find about Richard and about Venus and Serena, obviously. And I kind of just fell in love with him as a character. That I think that I knew peripherally the story that he had raised and coached them in Compton, and they had overcome a tremendous amount of adversity. But I didn't know anything really about him. And I just, as I read his book, as I watched his interviews, realizing, one, the circumstances that he had grown up in. He had grown up in Shreveport in just like the worst poverty and racism that you could possibly imagine. And then that he had this crazy plan before the girls were born that he was going to teach himself to play tennis and then raise this family of tennis champions. And
So insane.
yeah, but that was like the fifth big idea that he had tried to execute in his life, and that he just had this incredible determination to make something of himself and for his family. And he was just like the classic American hustler who was going to make it happen. And I just sort of fell in love with the determination of that, but also that he was, he's a larger than life guy, but he has a lot of sharp elbows, and he's done his life was in no means perfect. And I liked the idea that could follow someone who you were rooting for what they were trying to accomplish, but maybe not always the way they were going about it. And then the idea too, that's like this family, those 5 sisters and Orsi and their mother, that their journey was so unusual and exceptional too, and how to tell a story where I knew Richard was going to be the guiding point through the world, but really ultimately it is Venus and Serena and the rest of the family's lives that we're talking about here and their experiences. So how do you do that where like this is about a guy who ultimately maybe sets out to do something that is to satisfy something in himself, but realizing that really this is about their lives and their story, and at what point does he realize he has to, acquiesce the agency to them and have it be their lives. And so, that trying to find that balance was tricky, but it felt really inherent to what the story was.
I want to zero in on something that is happening at the moment, which is just obviously as a society, as a culture, we're starting to recognize greater there are greater sensitivities that people are aware of about, who can and should write about what and all of this. I mean, I think it really blew up with Green Book as an example of, here's a story of a black and white character. It was a white writer and director. Essentially, some people saw it as a white savior character. It was the sort of taking the focus from the Mahershala Ali character. Others said it's, obviously a lot of other people disagreed because it won Oscars for screenplay and picture. I want to ask, when you sit down to write something, do you guys, how much is this on your mind? I mean, Zach, you're a white guy writing about a black family. Sean, you're a hearing person writing about largely deaf community. You know, and maybe others felt reservations perhaps before going in. How much is this on your mind, and do you buy into this idea, which a lot of people also have, which is artists should be able to write about anything as long as it's done in a respectful way, or do you see that other side of that argument? So whoever wants to jump first, I'm just curious where you fall on that.
I think,
Everyone
you
just
know,
looks at you.
I mean, look at me, go ahead. I mean, it's always on my mind. I think that, look, even what Maggie is saying about being a woman and looking at how women, you know, female characters have been depicted, I think there is a part of lived experience that you do not know unless you have lived that experience. I really do think that. And yet, I also feel there was something that Marley Matlin's longtime interpreter Jack said to me. He's a CODA, and he said, I always felt like I was the electrical wire between two lines. Like I was never one of the poles. I was always living in this space of like being the wire that was, you know, the conduit for this. And when he said that, it resonated to me for the character, but it also resonated for me in terms of how I could tell this story. Like I did not live that experience. And so I felt like I could be the conduit and the wire, but it meant that I needed a team of people that were true collaborators at every step of the way, from writing the script where I had, you know, deaf eyes on that script. And I was like, hey, help me shape this story. You know, my ASL masters, I had 2 directors of ASL who came in who were my key creative allies on this movie, because they were really not just doing the translation of the script, but calling me out on my hearing gaze all the time. You know, it was like the way that we set up the living room furniture on the set. And, you know, I remember Ann Tomasetti, my ASL master, walking onto the set and being like, no deaf family is gonna put their furniture like this. Like you know, everything's circular, like deaf spaces are very specific, all of that. So, you know, I remember there's a saying within the deaf community, which I think holds true for any marginalized community that has been not just underrepresented, but misrepresented for a long time, because representation can be really harmful. And it's nothing about us without us. And I don't think that means that the person necessarily always sitting at the keyboard needs to be the exact thing, but you have to do your research. You have to give people a real voice. And that doesn't mean the consultant that you hire at the end of the movie, which I see happening in Hollywood a lot now, which is like, oh shit, like we messed up, let's go get, you know, a native writer to come in and put a stamp on this and say, oh no, you guys did it right. Like, you cannot do that. You have to have real powerful voices in the mix that you honor creatively from the very beginning. And you have to have a certain amount of humility of knowing what you don't know. We all have empathy. I think my favorite part of being a writer is stepping into someone's experience that's not mine and getting to live that. You know, it's the same thing with acting. It's like you get to have a big breadth of humanity and human experience, and yet I think you have to take a lot of care with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I can answer it better than that, but I think that I felt a tremendous amount of responsibility to make sure that we got it right, and that, I mean, one of it is that I think anytime you're writing or doing anything creative, you are trying to step into someone else's shoes and have empathy and understand that experience. So I think that's always a part of it. For me, I felt like I really understood the emotion of it and the journey, but the nuances of the world and the experience, I knew that I was not going to be able to do without really opening up to being a collaborator with. And one, I got to spend a lot of time with the family, and I think so. I wrote a draft of the script before we approached the family. I didn't have any credits, and we knew that. And being a white guy, if we were to approach them at the beginning, that I probably was just not going to be the person that would be chosen to write that film. But I was so in love with it, and we said, okay, well, if we take this to them and know that, say, like, you know, sit down with Venus and say, like, I know I'm sure I fucked up a lot of stuff in this, you know, but I want to hear your voice, I want to hear your experiences, and we did that throughout the course of the entire film. But then not just with, you know, Venus and Serena, and I spent a lot of time with Orsine, because Richard was so front-facing in the family, but Orsine was very private, and I think my original drafts of the script like just did not get that character right, because I think I was probably bringing in whatever expectations I had of who she was, and then to be able to sit down and say, no, this is what her experiences were. This is the things that she felt were important, were going to be represented, not story-wise, but really like emotionally. And then lastly, like, you know, between Ray Green, the director, who was amazing, and Will and Anjanou, really, Anjanou's a writer. I think I really tried to make an effort to be really open and collaborative, and that, like, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is the scene towards the end where Orsine, Anjanou, is braiding Venus and Serena's hair. And that, like, full credit to, like, Anjanou and Orsine. That's, you know, I think Orsine had said that those beads were so important not to very outwardly and proudly own their heritage, and that Orsine and Anjanou really talked about the really wanting to honor that in this movie, and honoring, you know, Black female beauty, and that's not something that I would have brought to the script, but being able to have those conversations. And I just felt very fortunate at some point that my job was to listen to what other people's experiences needed to be in the film, and then just trying to be that conduit, like, how can I help facilitate this as a writer?
I want to ask David and Maggie in particular about something that in the world of TV has certainly pre-Sopranos was a big frustration, I know, for you, and a big concern all around in the world of TV, which is you got to have a likable protagonist. How much is it on your mind, if at all, that, you know, the way the audience is going to connect or not connect with this character? David, you want to? You started this with the anti-hero. So yeah, tell us about. I mean, it must have been a scary leap to make at that time. But does it translate to movies as well?
Well, it wasn't a scary move to make, because I was so desperate to be done with everything that I had done. I was so desperate to throw all that stuff away in the garbage can. And so it wasn't difficult at all for me to do that. I just never gave one thought to that.
Mm-hmm. And Maggie, was it on your mind at all, that quote-unquote likability?
Well, certainly in television, partially because of The Sopranos, men have had access to that kind of expression for a long time. But for women, that's obviously been much more difficult. There's been a different onus on us to be appealing, to obviously look a certain way, and to express ourselves a certain way inside of a pretty small spectrum, I think. I remember somebody said to me in an early cut about Callie, the pregnant character. They said, I'm not sure about her. I wasn't able to tell if she was supposed to be friendly or ominous. And I was like, well, that's great. You're like, both. And that's many people who you come across. Right, you're like, are you friendly or ominous? I'm not sure, but you're compelling or you're not compelling. Well, I think there's a whole kind of tradition of filmmaking about crazy women, even movies that are so great.
Misery.
Or like a Woman Under the Influence, or whatever. You could name a million of them. And the thing about my film is it's very important that she not be crazy. If she's crazy, then, well, basically we're just reaffirming everything that we've been told forever about, the tiny spectrum of feelings that we're allowed to have and be considered normal, when in fact I think, especially about parenting, but probably about being a woman in general, that so much more is normal. And so then the challenge is, can you have a character who's very complicated? Another person said to me in a cut, does she have to take the doll? I was like, yes, she does. She has to take the doll. That's why it's a movie. And then the challenge is like, can you still bear to be in this person's mind? Okay, so Olivia Colman, I'm just thinking of one scene in particular where Ed Harris is so sweet. And,
At the bar?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
And he comes over
Great.
to her at the bar and he's lovely and he's warm and he's like kind of hitting on her. And at the end she says, can I finish my dinner now, Lyle?
Yeah.
And she's like very, very, very cold.
Yeah.
But then right afterwards, you see that she's someone who is alive enough to bear the shame of having just been an asshole. And she takes like a big drink of her wine. And all of us sometimes are assholes, as much as we'd like to think we're not. And if you're the kind of person who can go, oh my God, how did I just speak to that person like that, my mother, whoever, then you can change and you can shift and you can grow. But the fantasy version, I just don't think anyone's that into, if we're honest.
Here's a fun way I want to end this. Just the first thing that comes to your mind. We're going to call it rapid fire. Where is the place where ideas most frequently come to you?
Shower.
Shower.
Show.
Sometimes falling right before I fall asleep. And I used to actually, when I was even in the middle of directing, I would keep Post-its by my bed because I didn't want to fully wake up, but I wanted to like write on a Post-it whatever I thought and stick it on my wall behind my bed.
From your unconscious.
And then I would wake up with like Post-its next to my bed with like illegible things on
Okay,
them.
Zach
Yeah.
and James, any?
I'd say maybe like running, or like in the middle of the night I wake
Okay,
up. And,
James?
Everywhere. I'm literally haunted
Always.
by that.
God says action the minute he
The
wakes
Lord
up,
says
and
action.
then
Right.
it's flowing through
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Like I was like when you was talking, I was watching you, listening to you speak, and I was looking at your earring. I was like, oh, that would be wicked. Now, what would happen? That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what went through my brain. What would happen if
I'm gonna be in your next movie.
Exactly, watch it. And when you was talking, I was like, what would happen if I snatched the earring, ran off, but it was on camera? Okay, the world won't change.
Right.
My brain is actually.
This is great though, these are great. Who, if anyone, do you go to first as a sounding board for your work while it's still in progress?
There's this guy I know. His name is Jeymes Samuel. He is a G. Literally, I just talk to him. I literally talk things out, and also I always talk to myself. There's about 4 persons going on at once, and literally just argue things out, talk to myself, and I always come back with something interesting.
My husband is a big
Your
sounding
husband?
board for me. He's great. He's a great writer. He's a great thinker. I feel like I'm always, we have 2 little kids, and
Yeah.
now I'm always like, can you find time to read that scene? But I think he's kind of the first person that I bounce
Nice.
that off.
Maggie, your husband's in the business, but I don't know if he writes.
He's a really beautiful
Does he?
writer,
Yeah.
actually. Both my mother,
Yes.
which we were talking about how maybe we'll get my mom and you together.
Yeah. Yeah, Running on Empty was an influence.
Running on Empty was an
CODA.
inspiration.
Yeah.
So.
My mother and my husband, and I often don't agree with them. They'll often give me a little note that I'll think like, no. But sometimes they give me some things
Yeah.
where I'm like, fuck, I have to take that note. It's gonna blow my script up, but I have to take that note.
David and Zach?
Definitely my wife. I mean, I
Wife,
just like
okay.
she's gets tortured by having to
Nice.
read and talk it all out.
Is she a writer?
She wouldn't say she is, but she is.
Nice. David?
My wife said in 1980, I'm never going to read a screenplay of yours. Because I would just argue with her. You don't understand it, that's the problem. And it was useless,
Last question, and I think this is a one that many writers like these others will be curious to know. How do you know when you're done? Because you could technically go on, perfect things forever. And I know this is a problem for me with another kind of writing. I'm not writing scripts, but how do you know when you got it?
I remember my first TV writing job was on Men of a Certain Age, and I remember co-writing a script with this guy, Lou Schneider, and he would always say, pencils down, Heder, pencils down. Because it was like, I was always like, well, wait, but we could just go back and change it. And the problem with like Final Draft and everything, it just like creates, it's so easy. It's like this fluid way. But to me, the script, you're gonna write your movie again when you shoot it. You're gonna write your movie again when you edit it. So when you know you're directing your movie, I feel like it's the blueprint, and then when you build the building, it's all gonna change anyway. And I actually love rewriting on set. Like I love watching actors rehearse a scene and going, that really sucked. You say that, and sort of working it out in the moment.
Guys?
I have something to say about
Please.
that. I don't think I would like changing on set. I really want to have a solid groundwork so that it can just go as wild and strange on set as possible. So, but my editor said something really interesting to me that the next thing I wrote I really took to mind, which was, he said, here's what's going to happen in the cut. We're gonna get to a place where we start making changes and undoing them, making changes and undoing them. And once that's happened a few times, we'll know we're done. And the next thing I wrote, I really found that to be true. I'd take someone's note, no, put it back. Or I'd try to change something, no, put it back. And then I heard him in my head and went, okay, pencils down, I'm done.
Gentlemen?
For me,
Yeah.
when I say, okay, that's dope, it's, like, it's done, but it's never done, because then I'll have, as you said, final draft. Like just yesterday, I went back into my next movie, like, okay, let me just, that's going to be hard, meaning good. So there'll always be something else. But a script is exactly like a song.
Yeah.
You get to that stage where I go, wicked. Now it's time to hit the streets with it. But there's always going to be changes,
Right.
especially when you're working with actors and stuff.
Right.
Idris goes, is there a world in which means he's going to change something. Okay, what do you want to change, brother? So you're always going to change, but
Yeah.
you know when you got the foundation, I believe.
How do you know when you're done?
I don't.
You never know.
No. You know that famous Fellini line, movies are never finished, they're just abandoned.
That's
And that's kind of how I feel
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a director, so it's. I feel like for me, I know that there are going to be all these different iterations. You're like, you have the first read for maybe the producers, and then the next read for the director, and it's like the script is constantly evolving. So it's try to just, I don't know, just close my eyes
be
and
at
like
peace.
throw it
Yeah.
out there. Yeah.
Wait, can I add one thing to
yeah.
that? The thing about when you're like, that's kind of dope. And then I think maybe I feel like I'm done like with a draft anyway, when I'm excited to share it with some people instead of ashamed.
Yeah. You see the same thing, right? Same thing.
Well-
like that's dope. As soon as you're excited, you go,
You're
okay,
like-
wicked.
We gotta get, you know how they
Homeless.
have the like Staples button, whatever it says
Yeah.
when you, we gotta get you saying that's dope and
Yeah, that's
everybody
dope.
can.
That's dope. We should have one. I'm telling you, man, for Idris, when he goes, Jeymes, come. Is there a world in which, okay, Idris, what now? But his ideas are always better
that's
than
good.
mine. That's the thing with actors, right? Like
Actors are smart,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They are. They are.
That works out well for you, Maggie.
But that's the lesson you've learned also, having been in a TV writer's room, and I don't know if you've, like, there's always a better idea.
Yeah.
There is always a better idea. Even when
Yes.
you're like, I'm gonna pull this thread and it's gonna unravel the whole sweater and I can't do that, and you're like, but I can.
Yeah.
Let me
Because
say something,
there's always,
just quickly, right? There's a scene in the movie where the Rufus Buck fights this guy, the Dion Cole character, Wiley Esco, and it's a really brutal scene. And just before that scene, Idris said, Jeymes, look, is there a world in which Rufus Buck could get punched first by Wiley Esco? Rufus Buck doesn't get punched. He's my all-time Western cinema bad. No, Idris. No, there's no world in which Rufus Buck gets hit. He went, look, Jeymes, let me just show you. Dion, come here. All right, look, just hit me and, think. And then Dion just faints hitting him and Idris does this. And walks out like, this is dope as hell. There is a world in which.
But this is what I'm talking about like on my set, because I was an actor for 20 years and going like, is there a world in which, where I was just like, bring it.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
actors, Jesse Buckley and the little girls wrote the song Peel It Like a Snake. I mean, bring it.
Yeah, bring it, man.
Like you
Bring
guys
it.
are gonna make it exponentially more interesting than alone in our rooms. We can make it.
On behalf of the Hollywood Reporter, we're very happy there is a world in which you are all able to join us.
Special
And
thanks to
thanks for
Idris
your
Elba.
time. Yeah, thanks, Idris, and thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, bro.